Hi, so hello students. So today we are going to learn about pollination syndromes. What are pollination syndromes? Pollination syndromes are basically the traits a flower exhibit in order to attract pollen vectors. What are pollen vectors? Pollen vectors are basically the transfer of pollen from one flower to the other so that they can show pollination. So, this was first studied in 19th century by Italian botanist Federico Delfino. So, they can be two types of pollen vectors. So, either they can be abiotic, as the name suggests, non-living, that is your wind and water pollination, or they can be biotic, which can be mediated through birds, bees, flies, etc. So, what are these traits which can be exhibited by the flower? It can be the flower shape, the size, color, order, or nectar composition, etc. Like for example, a huge tubular red flower with huge amount of nectar tends to attract bird. So that flower is showing a syndrome or floral traits in order to attract the birds. So there are two types basically, like I already mentioned in my previous slide. I told about the abiotic and the biotic factors. Abiotic can be wind or water, or biotic can be bee, butterfly, moth, fly, bird, or bat. And there can also be a possibility that in a one flower there might be a two pollinators. Okay, like abiotic and biotic. So So the first abiotic one would be your wind pollination. So wind pollination, as the name suggests, when the medium is the wind, through wind the pollination occurs. So the flowers here can be small. The flowers are small, inconspicuous. They can be green, but they are not very showy. So, and they do not possess any scent or produce nectar. And the stigmas are large and feathery in order to catch the pollen grains. The anthers are produced in large amount, and the stamens are long and protrude out of the flower. Uh, Protrude out of the flower in order to affect pollination. So the next one is water pollination, that is commonly known as hydrophily. Here, since the water is required, so the plants are aquatic. So here water currents therefore act as a pollen vector, and the flowers are very small and inconspicuous, and they can pollen grains have a large feathery and stigmas. However, it is very uncommon. Like one of the example is Valsinaria, where the flowers emerge out of the flower water in order to affect pollen. So moving on to the biotic factors, that is biotic includes living beings pollinating the flowers. So the first one is bee pollination, commonly known as melitophily. So bee pollinated flowers are variable in shape, size, and they might be either bowl shape, that is your actinomorphic, that can be divided into multiple planes, or zygomorphic, that can be divided into one. Zygomorphic flowers include bees. So bee and foxgloves are pollinated by bee, and some bee flowers tend to be yellow or blue with ultraviolet nectar, and usually there are nectar guides present, and for the bees to visit the flowers you require a lot of ample amount of uh, uh, pollen, since they feed on pollen. So next one is butterfly pollination, that is psychophily, and butterfly pollination pollinated flowers tend to be large and showy. They need to have a landing area so that the butterfly can easily land on it, and some butterflies do not digest pollen, so nectar is offered. So you have to give an offering. You either give pollen, or you can give nectar. So these flowers have simple nectar guides, with the nectar is usually hidden in narrow tubes or spurs reached by a long tongue of the butterflies. Next is moth pollination, known as phalanophily. Among the most important moth pollinators are the hawk moths. So hawk moths, they have a behavior that resembles the hummingbirds. Okay, so uh, moths are usually active, are basically active at the night time. So the night blooming flowers tend to be pollinated by these hawk moths, and these night blooming flowers are large, showy, and they have a strong sweet scent in the evening, night, or in the early morning. Much nectar is produced to fuel the high metabolic rates needed to power their flight. So, next is fly pollination. Fly pollination can either be myo or saprophyly. Myophily phyllis plants tend not to emit a strong scent, and they can be purple, white, violet, and they have open dishes or two. Whereas saprophilous plants tend to attract flies that usually visit cow dung or animal dung. So these tend to mimic the odor of such. So hence the plants, they do not offer any reward. They just mimic the odor in order to attract the bee. Rafflesia is one of the common examples. Okay, for sorry, the Myophilus flowers. Bird pollination. So bird are large pollinators in comparison to moth or bee or butterfly. So there you have to give, in order to attract birds, you have to provide huge amount of food. So the food would be in the form of a nectar, which would be diluted, and you do not require to give a strong response to scent. So birds do not have a strong response, so they are odorless, but they require lot amount of nectar. So the flowers pollinated by the generalist birds are often short and wider. Generalist means like any bird can pollinate the flower. Okay, so there can be hummingbird or there can be passerines, like that. But if there is specialist, only one specific bird would be the pollinator there, and they are highly complex. So if the pollinator is absent, the plant would die. So the hummingbirds are often associated with pedunculous flowers, whereas the passerines or the perching birds require a platform like the butterfly. So the flowers have protruding structures. So the last one is your bat pollination. So bat pollination is known as chiropterophily. Obviously, bats are mammals, so you need to give them a huge amount of food in the form of pollen, nectar, etc. And they are active during the night. So the night blooming flowers would be there, and with that night blooming flowers, you have to give them nectar and pollen. So they can be white or light color, which open at the night, and they tend to you know spoil the flower also. So you have to take that also into account. The flower are usually bell shaped. So